So what's going on in the sample we just looked at? The style element defines the style, and the style element includes an x:"key" attribute. The style element includes a target type attribute, which indicates what kind of element it can be applied to. The style element contains within it setter elements, and each of those includes a property and a value attribute. The style elements can contain as many setter elements as necessary, and for complex properties, you use the child element syntax, as we did for the gradient in the previous example. To apply the style, you use the style attribute in the element, and darn, I forgot to show you that. When I went through and set the style property in the properties window, it also set the corresponding style attribute in the markup for that element. It doesn't really matter how it works, but that's what's going on. Remind me to show you that when we get back to the next example. The style we looked at looked something like this. We have a style element with x:"key and target type attributes, a bunch of setter elements inside, and one setter in this case, which includes a complex property which we have to set using the object property child element syntax. Now you have several different ways to apply a style. You can do it implicitly. We have only done it explicitly so far. To apply a style implicitly, you specify only a target type for the style. You don't supply the x:"key attribute, and in that case, since it doesn't have a key, you can't apply it explicitly. You can only apply it implicitly, and any element of the type you specify in the target type will automatically be styled using the style that you've created. Or you can apply it explicitly as we did in the previous example. There you specify both the target type and the x:"key attribute. And then you must set the style attribute for the element to that key value. If you set the x:"key attribute for a style, then it will only apply to elements that have their style attribute set to match that x:"key value. Let's look at setting styles implicitly and explicitly. As I promised, we need to look first at the style attribute of each button. Although we use the properties window to set this style, you can see it creates for you a static resource reference to colorful button style. Here to resolve that reference, the XAML parser will look within the current control for that style. Doesn't find it, it'll look in its container, the stack panel, didn't find it there. It'll look in the container of that, the grid, which doesn't have any resources set. If it doesn't find it there, it will look in the page resources, and there it does find the style it needs. Now, just to mention, if it doesn't find it there, it will look in app.xaml for that style. So far, we've set our styles explicitly. We explicitly indicated the style for each button here in this markup. Let me copy one of these, add a fourth button, there we are, and let's change this to fourth button and remove that style. And as you might imagine, the fourth button does not get that style. Why should it? Nothing said that it should. Okay, now here's a trick. Let's come up to our style and remove the x:"key attribute. Well, at this point, certainly the markup down here is unhappy, but did you notice that when we removed the x:"key attribute, the fourth button automatically got the same style? That's because now we're applying that style implicitly. We don't have to explicitly indicate it. And of course, I wouldn't want to have down here these style attributes set. We come down for each of these and remove them. The markup is happier, and each button on this page shares that same style, because we've implicitly apply the style to each button by not including the X:"key attribute here on the style. If we put it back, if I put, say, colorful button style here, nobody gets the style. We remove that so we get things back the way they were. Imagine you have a set of styles that contain a set of properties. You want to create a second style that uses those properties, plus maybe a few more. You could copy and paste from one set of styles to another and then make the modifications, or you could take advantage of XAML's ability to inherit styles from one style to another. There's a special attribute that makes this possible. It's the based on attribute. This allows you to inherit a style and allows you to add properties or override properties in the new style that's based on some existing style. Let's try a simple demo that demonstrates this behavior. In our sample, I'll start by modifying the colorful button style that we've already created by getting data from our sample text file. Let's go get this version of that style and paste it here, replacing our existing style. Looks a little smaller to me, a little more straightforward, and there we have the entire style, and you can see that it has a setter for font family, font size, font weight, margin, and foreground and background, and that's pretty much it. Let me place some controls into the grid as well. So I'm basically modifying the entire demonstration here. Let's place this content into the grid. Let me get rid of what's in there now. And replace with these three buttons. There we go. And what do we have? We have first a button whose content is normal button, whose margin is 5. Okay, we have a button whose content is large button style, but no other property set. We have a button whose content is colorful button style, whose style is set to a static resource of colorful button style, which we defined up here in the page.resources element. Let me reformat this so it's a little easier to read. And there we go. And by the way, I'm pressing Control A to select all, and then Control K, Control F to reformat the XAML markup. I'm going to add a second style to my page, which adds a little more functionality. Let's go get this style named border style, and we'll look at what it has. Border style can apply to any border element. It has a border brush, a border thickness, a margin, and a corner radius value set. At this point, it's not applying to anything because since we have the X:"key attribute, we'd have to manually or explicitly apply it to any element where we want to use the style. Now I can add that style manually, or I can go to the Properties window, and for the border, in the Miscellaneous group, choose Style, choose Local Resource, and there is the only style available to us. It's called Border Style. It's the only style that can apply to a border, so I'll select it, and you'll see that does modify what our border looks like. Let me add yet another style. This one is called Large Button Style. And again, it doesn't apply to anything yet because we have the key attribute, and so we'll have to explicitly apply it. So we can go to this button and apply that style using the Properties window. Down here in the Miscellaneous section, there's Style, Local Resource, and it was called Large Button Style. There it is. And that adds a large button style. Now, if we look at these two styles, large button style and colorful button style, you'll see that they both contain pretty much the same content. Here, colorful button style has a font family, font size, font weight, margin, and large button style has font family, font size, font weight, and margin. And they're all exactly the same. Why should I carry around 2 copies of all those settings when instead it seems like we could have the colorful button style be based on the large button style with the addition of the colors? So to do that, let me modify colorful button style. Let's delete this one. And go get the new version, which uses that based on attribute. Here, let me go paste it in. And you can see here, we have a new style. Let's reformat so it's easier to read. We have a new style called colorful button style, whose target type is button, who's based on a static resource named large button style. And we add the individual properties that we want to use that modify the large button style to make it colorful button style. And you can see that button didn't change at all. Now, it's important to note that you can override properties in a based on style. So even though this style is based on large button style, and large button style sets the font size, let me take this, copy and paste it down here, and override it. So, of course, that's redundant, but if I change this to 32, now our colorful button style will have a larger font size, but still inherit the rest of the settings. Now also note that in my based on style, if I were to change something like font weight or margin, let's change margin to be not 5 but 15, that affects everyone that uses either the base style or any styles that inherit from it that don't override that style setting. It's important to note that using the based on attribute can get very confusing very fast, and you should take care only to use it in cases where you have a direct descendancy. That is, a style that is based on another style where you don't want to override styles. Once you start doing this and overriding styles in the based on style, you're going to regret it. There's no tooling for the based on styles that helps you view the hierarchy. It doesn't really support all the features of inheritance, so be careful when you use the based on style attribute. It can be helpful. It can also just make your life much more complicated. It's important to note the standard styles that come to you when you create a new project. You'll find that the template includes a resource library named standardstyles.xaml. And this template defines many standard styles that you want to use as part of your applications. That is, the more you use these standard styles, the more your application will look like and fit in with other Metro style applications. Can you define your own? Of course you can. But if possible, you'll want to base them on these standard styles using the based on attribute. You can override behavior, but you'll want to think about trying to use the standard styles if you can. Let's go investigate where those standard styles are and what's included. Our sample application started life as a standard blank template project. And if I go to the Solution Explorer, I'll find in the Common folder standardstyles.xaml. I didn't put it there, it's part of the template. Of course, one might wonder how you get access to things in standardstyles.xaml. If we look at app.xaml, you'll find an application.resources element which supplies resources that are available to any element of the application. Within this, we'll find a resource dictionary element which supplies a resource dictionary that everyone can use. And within there, a merge dictionaries property which allows you to merge various resource dictionaries together. One of those resource dictionaries is supplied here, whose source is common/standard styles. So standardstyles.xaml is available to you as a resource dictionary anywhere within the application. If we look at standardstyles.xaml, you'll see that it is defined as a resource dictionary. It contains within it various other elements, but most important for our use are these style elements. Each style element defines a named style that's available throughout your application, and you can see that each one applies to a different target type. These two apply to rich text block. There's another one and another one. You can see here that basic text style can apply to a text block. Baseline text style can apply to a text block, and a few more text block styles. And then down here we have some button styles. Well, let's try to apply the text button style to one of our buttons just to see what it looks like. If we go back to our page, let's say here, I've already forgotten the name, it was text button style. Okay, so let's apply that here. We'll go to the Properties window, find the Style attribute, Local Resource, and it was text button style. There we go. And if we apply that, now we're using a standard looking button style. Clearly, using that style will make our button look more like other Metro style applications than using the large button style or colorful button style that I had created. There's no rule saying you have to use these built-in styles, but certainly your app will look more consistent with others if you do. One thing to note, here in the local resource items, the only things you'll see here are those things that can be applied to the type of control you're currently working with. Also note that in the window here, you can edit the resource. If you decide to edit the resource, you're changing it here in standard style. So be careful about doing that. Back on our button, if we go to the Properties window again and go to Style, there is another option, which is to convert it to a new resource. This will take the existing style, allow you to create a new one. I'll call it My Button Style. You can choose where you want to store it, either at the application level in app.xaml, in this document, that is our page, or in a resource dictionary whose name you supply. I'll store it in this document, and now we should have a style named My Button Style in this page's XAML. Let's see if it's there. Oh, it's a big one, that's for sure. Here's My Button Style. It copied all the settings from the text button style, and now you can make modifications. That's the cut and paste version of inheriting from styles. I now have my own copy. I can make whatever changes I want, and it won't modify the original style. In any case, make good use of these built-in standard styles to allow your application to fit in with other Metro style applications.